What's going on, everyone? Wesley Shoemaker joined by Keenan, Cummings. Football was back in Morgantown. However, it did not go the way that the Mountaineers or Mountaineer fans wanted to today. West Virginia opened the season with a 34-12 loss to Penn State. There was a lot that went on, a rain delay that lasted over 2 hours, but overall, Keenan, I think we both can agree that it just looked like Penn State was the better, more talented team.
Yeah, and there's that on the surface, and then there's also the fact that West Virginia really didn't give themselves a chance to win this game. You know, they looked out of sorts on offense. The defense struggled at times. At times they looked pretty good against the run, especially in the first half. Second half, it kind of came unglued a little bit. They couldn't get off the field, couldn't get stops. Offensively, it was at times a disaster. You get the early turnover on the botch snap from Penn State, thinking, and you over on just stuff that should not happen with a senior-laden team, a veteran team. There wasn't a lot of penalties in this game for West Virginia, but just alignment, assignment, you name it. Everything else it looked off, and we can debate forever, as to what's the reason for that. Was the moment too big for West Virginia? Were they too amped up? There's a lot of reasons. Did they just have a bad day? I think that all that's fair. You look at the numbers and they're not very flattering for West Virginia at all. Penn State outgained them 457 to 246, 34-12 on the scoreboard. Third downs, West Virginia was abysmal. Yards per play, 7.6 to 3.7. I mean, go up and down. West Virginia hung their hat on that 140-yard rushing streak, 16 straight games. It's something that Neil Brown's talked about a lot. A lot of people around the program have talked a lot. They had 85 yards in this game.
Couldn't even crack 100.
No, they averaged 2.3 yards per carry. That hasn't happened since 2022, I believe, against Texas. And that's back when JT Daniels was slinging the rocks. So I think that this all around was just deflating in a sense if you're a West Virginia fan, just because, you thought this was your chance. And I think me and you were both cautious, heading into this game. There was this kind of, I don't want to call it, I guess, a wave of euphoria in a sense, where a lot of fans, a lot of people around this game were kind of pretending as if West Virginia should just waltz in and win. And I never thought that was the case. I did think this would be a close game. I picked Penn State. I did not see this outcome coming. I think anybody around the program, if you ask them, Neil said at this post-game press conference, they didn't play well enough. They didn't give themselves a chance to win, and that's not what you expect. I think it's kind of shocking. It kind of makes you take a look back and wonder. It's the type of loss, yes, West Virginia losing to Penn State, that's not the problem here. Penn State's a good team. They were favored in this game on the Mountaineer field, but it's how the game unfolded. Was this a one-off? Was this just a bad performance on a bad day for West Virginia? Or is this a troubling sign of things to come? And that's going to be the question that needs answered. And you're not going to probably answer it next week against Albany, but once this schedule flips and gets harder, we've talked about how hard the schedule is going to get. You're not going to play anybody on paper that's Penn State's caliber with athletes and kind of where they're ranked right now, but it's concerning. There's no other way around it. It's either a bad day at the office or a bad sign of things to come.
I think the biggest thing for me to start with is that I think when you speak of the narrative that was built of a lot of fans kind of like expecting West Virginia to win this game or be in this game, I think that was a lot built because of the national attention this game had. When you bring in McAfee Show, when you bring in Big Noon, you're like, okay, those places go to these schools and go to these games because it's two good teams playing. Now, to your point, I think we both fully agree that Penn State won this game, but West Virginia did not even give themselves a real chance to kind of be in this game, I don't think. I think it starts in that first quarter on offense, right? Like you get the ball in a great spot after a fumble, and then boom, bad snap, and the game, and then there's a scoring opportunity gone. Then you have a couple fourth downs, a couple drives later where they just can't convert there either. And while it was a questionable spot to some, not questionable to others, right? Like that doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things, but they had the opportunities. And going back to your thing about this team being old, your whole offense kind of returned. That was the big selling point, is that you've got the quarterback back, the running backs back, a lot of the receiver rooms returned. And it just looked like there was really no mesh there. Like it was just like kind of choppy. There was never a flow to the offense.
The whole day just looked off.
It was weird. Like if Aubrey Burks from the jump at the coin toss said what he said, like we're gonna go score, and then the first play happens and it's a catchable ball that Traylon Ray drops, and I think we kind of looked at each other in the press box like, oh, like
that's an opportunity,
right? Like those little things, they add up. And I know Neil referenced it after the game. He said there were 4 explosive play opportunities. There was obviously the one with Cole Taylor, one with Traylon Ray. Like it was just a mess. And I think that's where the troubling sign is that you've had a month to prepare not only for the season, but kind of specifically for this game. It's not like you were facing a lower level group of 5 or even an FCS school to open. Like everyone knew the quality of opponent. And it felt like Penn State was prepared to play today and that they were ready for the moment, and that West Virginia just simply was not.
And I want to be clear here when I say that fans should expect to win these type of games. I mean, it's year 6 of Neil Brown. I'm not being critical when I say that. I'm just saying that the games are there's lines on the games for a reason. West Virginia was an underdog, whether we expected it or not. But there is no excuse. And Neil Brown, to his credit, the guy does take a beating sometimes from fans and some other people, but he's pretty much just blamed himself, blamed his coaching staff, blamed his team. It's their fault. The fans were ready to go. They had 62,000 there today. The atmosphere was incredible to start that game. Now we're going to take out the rain delay. That kind of killed a little bit of thing. It's hard to blame people. I mean, it was hot and then it got really cold and rainy and
there was thundering and raining and sideways and windy.
Yeah. And I just, I think the thing that is most shocking to me personally, and probably fans and, that read my work or other people on the beats work, your work, this isn't something anybody saw coming. You
Right.
expected the offense. You thought the defense could have some makeup. We've talked about the concerns with some of the new secondary pieces, and how's the defensive line going to respond? We know they have depth, but how quality is it? Those are all questions that you had. You didn't have questions about the offense or Garrett Green. The only questions you really had on offense were, is Brandon Yates going to be able to play center? Is Nick Malone going to be able to play tackle? And that's pretty much it.
And Nick Malone, to his credit, he looked fine at the tackle position.
Yeah.
But then the question mark of the snaps puts Yates into question. And then Garrett Green took blame for both of those. I think it's all timing and there's a lot that goes into it. However, every single time Neil gets to the podium during fall camp, he says we practice those concepts, those mesh points, those handoffs a ton, and it just didn't look like that today.
Yeah, and sometimes that happens. Sometimes you don't have your best, man. I do want to drive that home to people. I don't think that this is a better football team than they showed today. And they played a football team that could expose them for playing poorly. I mean, Penn State was better up front. I mean, any way you slice it, they were. And they knew it. And they had enough playmakers and enough things to be able to move the football. And I think that they did that. Defensively, that's a really fast team. How many times sitting next to you in the press box that I go, man, they are hitting hard.
Especially early.
Fast and strong and athletic, and I think that really showed up. Especially that's a good defense. I mean, I knew they were going to be impressive. That might be a better defense than the one they had last year, just in terms of speed.
And before the game, you said it was going to probably be the opposite. You thought?
Yeah, I mean, I'll admit it. I was impressed with what I saw today. They really kind of shut West Virginia down, and Garrett Green did not play his best today, and they needed him to. We discussed that leading up to this game. We discussed it all the way up to the game. 2 times they've played Penn State in the last 2 years, and it's not quarterback versus quarterback, but Drew Aller was a difference maker, and Garrett Green in the West Virginia offense was not. And,
Yeah, but going to Green, the thing that was kind of just confusing, puzzling, troubling, like he just didn't run the ball, right? Like a large facet of his game is his legs, and not only the design runs, but the scrambles. And it seemed a lot of times – he there were probably opportunities to run, and I know they were spying a lot for the most part, and they kind of had a backer there. But go make a play. If you're not helping your team, and his throws were pretty. I think we can both say his throws were all over the place. The accuracy was certainly not there today. And as you said, the question is why. We obviously don't know if it was because the moment was large, if Penn State's just a really good defense, what the case is, right? They are a good defense.
Yeah, and sometimes it just happens. I think the one thing I will say, though, is I think the encouraging thing is we've seen this group be good before.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think that, to answer my question before, kind of a little spoiler, I don't think this is a sign of – I don't think this football team is as bad as they look today. They're not going to play Penn State every week, obviously. They're not going to make some of these mistakes they made today. I think that it's just kind of everything compiled. Sometimes you have bad days at the office, and I think this is that, to me at least. Everything I'd heard, around this team coming into the season, everything Neil Brown had said, the coaches had said was encouraging. So that's the part to me that is alarming, just because it's kind of like Neil addressed this in his press conference after the game. He didn't see this coming. It just they just were not up to task today. And it's hard enough to beat a team that's ranked in the top 10. We can argue where Penn State fits in the playoff picture, blah, blah, blah. We can do that all day long. That's a good football team. That's definitely talent-wise one of the better teams West Virginia will play this season. Just look at all the guys on their roster. I do a feature every week. I didn't even list all of them this time because there were so many that West Virginia tried to get and weren't able to get. I mean, they're loaded with good players, and I think you saw that play out today. But I do think we can credit Penn State all we want. You got to point the finger at West Virginia. I mean, I really do think that Penn State beat them, but West Virginia didn't help themselves.
Yeah, and I think when you go to your point about having a bad day at the office, I think it just sucks when you have a bad day at the office and it's compounded with the stage that this game was, right? Because the expectation was that you can compete and keep this a close game and have a shot to win. When you have a bad game on that stage, it's like all the red flags go up because everyone expected one thing and got a totally different thing. However, I as you said, I'm not down on this team. We're going to get into big picture later, but just talking about this game, right? Line of scrimmage, Penn State controlled it, both sides of the ball. They were able to stop the run, and they ran the ball really, really well. And then, as you said, Drew Aller, man, he made plays in that third quarter. What stood out to me is that drive where West Virginia, if you wanted to get back in the game, you have to get a stop on that first drive and then go score. And they had him in 3rd and 7 and 3rd and 8, and they have it greatly covered on the back end, and Drew Aller just makes a play. And he just uses his legs, extends the play. A couple of the throws early for him, I think we were it wasn't great, but there were also a couple throws where he just really just ripped the ball, put it on the money, and did exactly what he needed to do. And so you can see the talent from him. Those two backs, Nick Singleton, Katron Allen, they did their thing. And yeah, Penn State is a good team. There's no way around that. And West Virginia obviously didn't have their A game today, but at least offensively for Penn State, I'm not really upset with West Virginia's defensive performance. I think outside of that botched 30-second period at the end of the first half and a couple of those big runs, outside of those two, the 40-yard touchdown run and that play, West Virginia's defense played pretty well, and there were a lot of bodies going in and out. The depth was certainly tested, and we don't have snap counts or anything like that yet, but I was more impressed, obviously, with the defense than the offense, and I think the defense played much better than the offense for West Virginia, despite the 34 points they gave up.
Yeah, they got him on that 50-yard touchdown too with a nice concept. It's something I think they did that a little bit last year too, and they called a good game offensively. I can't believe we made it almost 13 minutes into this podcast without talking about that sequence. Yeah. I mean, it's easy to say one play, two plays changes the game, but you felt it in the stadium, if that makes sense. If you were there, you felt it.
And it's it's a 7-point game. It's a 14-point swing theoretically.
And you played awful, and it's a 7-point game.
Yeah, and then it's a 14-point swing of you go from down 7 at the half with some momentum because you just scored to now down 14 to 2.5 hours later, Penn State gets the ball back, right? So if it's a 7-point game after that delay, there's probably more fans there. There's probably a little more juice in that building. There's a chance that, okay, maybe someone then steps up and make a play, and then your offense has the ball down 7. But when your offense touches the ball for the first time after they scored and you're down 21, you're never going to win a football game like that.
Yeah, it was tough. I mean, that was just a tough sequence for West Virginia, especially how it happened. You stuff them on 2nd down, then you give up a 50-yard, and then you give up a touchdown. I agree with Neil. I was surprised that wasn't reviewed, but that's water under the bridge at this point. And I think that really for West Virginia now, I asked Garrett Green about this. They got to rely on their leadership. You've talked about your leadership. You've talked about how you're a veteran team all offseason. That's never more important than now. I mean, you've got to show that. You've got to be able to move on from this. You can't do anything about this. People are going to be mad, and rightfully so, because West Virginia, they went face down. They fell face first in this game. And yes, Penn State's a good team, but we've talked about it. You got to be able to take care of business too, and they didn't do that. So I think fans are going to be frustrated, but really for this team, you got to block that noise out. They're used to this in a sense. Like I guess the one part here for me, just from a big picture, is you build so much momentum. The fan base is, I would say, as united as it's been in some time. And this happens. So you got to hope that this is just a blip on the radar and not a thing. That's not, not a sign of things to come. So we'll see what happens. I think that there's a lot of football left to be played. I picked a 9-3 season, and I picked this game as a loss. So everything is still in.
You're perfect.
Yeah, everything is still in play for me. Do I think this team's going to win 9 games if they play like they did today? Absolutely.
Heck no, they're not going bowling.
Yeah, I'm not trying to fool anybody here. I mean, I'm not trying to paint roses and sunshine, but I think this team will be better than what you saw today, but we're definitely going to find out. But we're going to do this more in depth. We're going to take a little bit. We're going to look at some of the film, go back and kind of look at what happened in the game, look at some more than snap count. And I wanted to get kind of an immediate reaction out there to you from what we saw from the press box, what our feelings were after the game, and kind of, just a little bit us talking with you, a little bit of fireside chat here on a Saturday night.
Yeah, so we'll be back Monday afternoon with a new podcast episode, kind of talking, as Keenan said, more big picture, kind of a bigger breakdown of this game. One housekeeping note for those who might not have seen it yet: Wyatt Milam did miss the entirety of the second half, and
played great for that.
Played great. Yep. But he was cramping, so nothing obviously passed this week with him. It doesn't appear on the outside by any stretch of the imagination. Shaheem White got banged up. He came back in. Other than that, they kind of stayed healthy. There were bodies that went down, but I don't think there was anything too crazy there. So
physical football game.
Yeah,
that happens.
It does. So West Virginia, unfortunately, they fall week 1 to Penn State 34-12. We will be back with a lot more of the podcast on Monday, as well as tonight and tomorrow on WVSports.com with a ton of content, right? Like football's here. And so read about it. So that's all I could say. So for myself, I'm Wesley Shoemaker, joined by Keenan Cummings. We do appreciate you listening. And this is the WVSports.com podcast.